He was the rugged cowboy with a righteous stare, the single father who raised his son with a rifle in one hand and wisdom in the other. To millions, he was Lucas McCain. But behind the scenes, behind the sharp-eyed lawman of the Rifleman, lived a man named Chuck Connors, a man whose real-life story was even more dramatic, heroic, and heartbreaking than anything that ever played out on screen. This is the untold story of Chuck Connors, the athlete, the soldier, the Hollywood icon, the man loved by millions and misunderstood by just as many. A story of glory, regret, Cold War secrets, shattered glass, broken marriages, and one final, haunting goodbye. Before the cameras rolled, before his Winchester spun in the New Mexico sun, Chuck Connors was simply Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors. Born April 10, 1921, in Brooklyn to Irish immigrant parents struggling through the Great Depression, his childhood was defined by poverty, resilience, and dreams too big for their Bay Ridge apartment. His father worked the docks as a longshoreman. His mother took odd jobs. Their home was cold in the winter and food was often scarce. But young Chuck found his escape in motion, running, catching, throwing. The cracked sidewalks and dusty courts of Brooklyn became his field of dreams. At 14, his raw athleticism caught the attention of scouts. Offered a scholarship to Adelphi Academy, Chuck entered a world of privilege he'd never known. "I never felt like I belonged," he later said, "but I knew I had to make it count." He played every sport he could: baseball, basketball, football, track, driven not by fame but by survival. He earned over 25 college offers but chose Seton Hall University in New Jersey. There, the nickname Chuck was born. Shouted from first base, "Chuck it to me!" Stuck just like his drive to escape poverty. But before he could finish college, the world went to war. In 1942, Chuck joined the Army. Due to his size and physical skills, he was made a tank warfare instructor and eventually worked at West Point, even coaching future football champions. During his downtime, he played semi-pro baseball and professional basketball, always chasing the next game, the next opportunity, the next dream. After his honorable discharge in 1946, Connors joined the Boston Celtics in their inaugural season. At 6 feet 5 inches, he was a formidable presence and became the first NBA player to ever shatter a backboard. But the glory was brief. He averaged just 4.5 points and left the team the next year to chase his first love, baseball. In 1949, Chuck played his first and only game with the Brooklyn Dodgers. He hit into a double play and was sent down before he could blink. "I thought I blew everything," he admitted years later. But he didn't give up. He fought his way back with the Montreal Royals and eventually made it to the Chicago Cubs in 1951. 2 home runs, 66 games, .239 average. Not stardom, but dignity. Then came 1952, and with it, fate. While playing for the minor league Los Angeles Angels, Chuck hit a massive home run that caught the eye of MGM casting director Billy Gordon. "That's the Laurence Olivier of the Diamond," Gordon whispered. Days later, Connors limped into MGM with a minor injury and a major decision to make. Within 72 hours, he had a Hollywood contract. His first film role was a small part in Pat and Mike alongside Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. Tracy pulled him aside and said, "Stick with it. You've got something." That sentence lit a fire in Chuck that no crowd ever had. He threw himself into acting with the same ferocity he gave to sports. Between 1952 and 1958, he racked up over 20 films and 18 TV appearances, including a powerful performance as a father in Old Yeller that would forever change his life. In 1958, producers of a new Western took note of his Old Yeller performance. The show would be called The Rifleman, about a widowed father raising his son on the frontier. They offered Chuck the lead, but the money was low. Connors almost walked away until they added a 5% ownership stake. He accepted, and in doing so, he accepted immortality. Chuck trained endlessly, working with expert Rod Redwing to perfect the rifle spin, blistering his hands in the process. The weapon became his signature, a customized Winchester 1892 with a modified lever, able to fire faster than anything on TV. But it wasn't just the gun. It was the man holding it. Lucas McCain wasn't a one-dimensional cowboy. He was a loving, wounded, deeply moral father. When the show premiered on September 30th, 1958, over 14 million viewers tuned in. It became the 4th highest-rated program on television. Letters poured in. from single fathers, from war veterans, from boys who saw in Lucas the father they never had. Chuck Connors wasn't just acting, he was embodying something much deeper. And behind the scenes, one boy in particular found something real. Johnny Crawford, who played Mark McCain, wasn't just Chuck's co-star, he became his surrogate son. Their bond was more than professional. It was familial, profound, and deeply emotional. While Chuck Connors portrayed a protective and principled father on The Rifleman, his off-screen relationship with young Johnny Crawford became a living extension of that role. What started as casting chemistry grew into something rare in Hollywood, a genuine father-son relationship built on trust, mentorship, and unconditional support. From the first day on set, Chuck saw something in Johnny, a spark, a vulnerability, a need for guidance. And Johnny, in turn, saw in Chuck the steady hand and reassuring presence many children dream of. Chuck went beyond scripts and call times. He invited Johnny on weekend getaways into the mountains, where they'd sleep under the stars, share ghost stories, and talk about life far from Hollywood's cameras. "He made me feel safe," Johnny recalled in later years. "He was the one person I knew I could count on, no matter what." The lessons went far beyond acting. Chuck taught Johnny how to change a tire, ride a horse, split firewood, and navigate the pressures of fame with humility. On set, when other adults treated Johnny like a child, Chuck treated him like a partner. He made sure Johnny's voice was heard during production meetings, even encouraging him to offer input on his character's lines. That mentorship left a lasting imprint. Decades later, Johnny would still call Chuck his second father, crediting him with helping him become the man he was. And Chuck felt the same. He once wrote in a private letter, "If I've done anything right in this world, it was being there for Johnny." Their bond endured long after The Rifleman ended. They kept in touch for years, exchanging letters and phone calls. When Chuck passed away in 1992, Johnny was one of the first to arrive at his funeral. His eulogy was nearly choked by tears, his words simple yet unforgettable. "He wasn't just a co-star, he was my father." In an industry known for disposable relationships, theirs was the rare exception, genuine, enduring, and heartbreakingly beautiful. It wasn't written in a script. It was written in the moments between takes, in fireside talks, in quiet car rides, and in the kind of love that never needs to be spoken aloud to be felt forever. But as The Rifleman rose in popularity, Chuck's freedom shrank. Hollywood couldn't see past Lucas McCain. He was offered cowboy role after cowboy role, and turned down 8 Western pilots in just 2 years. He fought to break free. In Branded, 1965 to 66, he played a disgraced cavalry officer. In Roots, 1977, he stunned audiences as a brutal slave owner, a role so jarring it earned him an Emmy nomination and reminded the world of his range. Still, casting directors murmured, "Too Western, too McCain." Chuck once said, "Lucas gave me everything and took everything away," a paradox that haunted his career and his soul. Behind the fame was a man struggling to keep control. Chuck Connors was married 3 times, and each relationship crumbled under the weight of infidelity, distance, and emotional turbulence. His first wife, Elizabeth Riddell, bore him 4 sons, but their marriage collapsed in 1962, marred by rumors of affairs and emotional neglect. One son would later say, "People ask me what it was like to grow up with Lucas McCain. I tell them I didn't. I watched him on TV like everyone else." His second marriage to Indian actress Kamala Devi was progressive, passionate, and volatile. By 1972, it ended in quiet bitterness. Then came Faith Quabius, a former Playboy bunny 33 years his junior. They married in 1977. By 1980, it was over, amid allegations of abuse and emotional manipulation. Chuck denied the claims, but the damage was done. Even as he inspired fans with on-screen integrity, Chuck's private life drew whispers. Co-stars declined to work with him again. Some described him as flirtatious, manipulative, and unpredictable. He could charm a room, then go cold in seconds. Indeed, Chuck Connors' life defied categories. As much as he was typecast in Hollywood, he constantly surprised the world outside of it. Nowhere was that more evident than in his improbable role as a cultural ambassador during one of the tensest periods of the Cold War. While most of Hollywood distanced itself from politics, especially anything remotely pro-Soviet. Connors stepped into the diplomatic void with a surprising openness. In 1973, when Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev visited the United States, he made a startling request. He wanted to meet Lucas McCain. Not the president, not a general, Chuck Connors. That single meeting made headlines around the world. The two men, separated by language, ideology, and upbringing, connected through something purely human: admiration. Brezhnev adored the Rifleman. To him, Lucas McCain wasn't just a cowboy. He was a symbol of integrity, honor, and fatherhood, qualities universal in appeal. So impressed was Brezhnev that he personally invited Connors to the Soviet Union for a state visit. When Chuck arrived in Moscow later that year, the reception was more like that of a rock star than a Western actor. He visited the Kremlin, attended special screenings of The Rifleman, and even participated in a lighthearted shooting contest with Brezhnev using custom pistols Chuck had gifted him. Soviet citizens flooded the streets to get his autograph. He wasn't just an actor to them, he was a living legend. Connors filmed a documentary during the visit titled Peace and Friendship, aimed at showing that even during global tension, two nations could find common ground. It aired across Soviet TV to millions of viewers and became one of the most watched American-made programs in USSR history. For a man who had once been pigeonholed by American studios, Connors found a second act not in film, but in diplomacy. It was poetic in a way. The man who struggled to be heard in his own family, who felt unseen beyond McCain's shadow, was suddenly a voice for peace between two world powers. Even in his contradictions, Chuck Connors kept proving he wasn't just the character on screen. He was an enigma in plain sight, a man both cast in iron and built on contradiction. And perhaps that's what made him timeless. That year, when Brezhnev visited the US, he asked to meet one person, Chuck Connors. Their meeting sparked an unlikely friendship. Brezhnev invited Chuck to Moscow, where he was treated like royalty. He met fans, filmed a documentary, and discussed peace, becoming an unofficial ambassador between two superpowers. In 1991, nearly 30 years after The Rifleman ended, Chuck donned the hat and rifle one last time in The Gambler Returns, the luck of the draw. He wept while selecting Lucas's hat, knowing this would be his final bow. In early 1992, Connors was diagnosed with lung cancer, worsened by decades of heavy smoking. He was hospitalized with pneumonia that October. On November 10, 1992, Chuck Connors passed away at the age of 71. At his funeral, Johnny Crawford stood trembling. "He was more than a co-star," Johnny said. "He was my father." That moment, raw and tear-streaked, said more than any tribute ever could. Chuck Connors was one of only 13 men to ever play both Major League Baseball and NBA basketball. He was the first NBA player to shatter a backboard. He was a star of over 60 films and TV shows. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But more than accolades, he left behind a story of grit, contradiction, and heart. He was a legend to millions, a mystery to many, a hero to some, a stranger to others. But perhaps the most haunting truth about Chuck Connors is how deeply he blurred the line between legend and loneliness. He was adored on screen, yet often alone off-screen. The public saw Lucas McCain's stern but loving gaze, a man who embodied protection, justice, and emotional strength. But those closest to him, his wives, his children, even his friends, sometimes saw a man struggling to live up to his own myth. Even as his image beamed into millions of homes every week, Chuck Connors wrestled with a kind of emotional isolation that fame only intensified. He was always on, always performing, not just for the camera, but in life. Friends recalled how he could charm an entire room, only to fall into quiet brooding when the lights dimmed. He was a man suspended between adoration and self-doubt, forever chasing the next applause to silence the ghosts of his own insecurities. His contradictions extended beyond Hollywood. Despite being seen as a symbol of American values, Connors developed an unlikely friendship with Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev during the Cold War, a fact that stunned the US diplomatic community. While most actors stayed clear of political friction, Chuck leaned in. In Moscow, he was received like a hero, a living embodiment of the strong but principled man the Soviets admired on television. In a time when the Iron Curtain divided ideologies, Connors became an unexpected bridge, charming both generals and everyday citizens alike. Yet back home, his personal life continued to fray. He longed for the kind of family unity he portrayed on screen but seemed unable to maintain it in real life. "I've given my strength to Lucas," he once wrote in a letter. "And sometimes I feel empty at home." It was a confession that cut to the heart of who he really was, a man who could give the world strength but struggled to hold onto it for himself. And maybe that's why he remains so unforgettable. Because Chuck Connors wasn't just a hero of the screen. He was a reflection of our deepest hopes and our most painful contradictions. He didn't just live a story, he became one. If Chuck Connors ever touched your life, even just once through the flicker of a black and white TV, drop a comment below. Share your memories. And if you believe in telling the full stories, the real stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the legends we love the most are the ones we're only just beginning to understand.